Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we cut through the noise and get straight to the surprising insights just for you. Today, we're diving into a concept that might genuinely shift how you understand yourself and, well, your relationships. We often think about issues in our sex life as, well, just about sex. Pretty straightforward, right? But what if they're actually surface ripples of something far deeper? What if they're symptoms of these unconscious stories you've been telling yourself your entire life? Narratives that impact every single part of you. We're exploring Dr. Gail Saltz's powerful book, The Ripple Effect, How Better Sex Can Lead to a Better Life. And it brilliantly challenges the idea that, a fulfilling sex life is optional. She argues quite compellingly that it's absolutely essential for your body and your spirit.
That's such a crucial distinction, isn't it?
hmm
It's not just about what happens, behind closed doors. It's really about how these fundamental narratives shape our entire operating system, our whole way of being. So our mission in this deep dive is to truly unpack how our sexuality is profoundly shaped by these lifelong narratives we construct. And here's the breakthrough Dr. Saltz offers. Understanding and actively changing these deeply ingrained stories, which, as we'll see, are often rooted way back in childhood experiences. The understanding can create a profound ripple effect, real positive transformation across all areas of your life, from your career ambitions to your closest relationships. We'll explore 5 specific types of these stories using these powerful real-life composites of women from Dr. Saltz's practice. It really gives you a tangible sense of how these narratives play out.
Okay, so let's really dig into this core concept then. What Dr. Saltz reveals is that we all, every single one of us, live our lives according to these stories we've imagined for ourselves. And the wild part, these narratives are so deeply embedded, often entirely unconscious, that while they feel like our absolute truth, like this is just who I am, they are in many cases fundamentally unreliable. And what's even more fascinating is that they don't just sit there in the background. They actively define our sexual selves and profoundly affect our experiences, not just in bed, but like throughout our entire existence.
Exactly. And what's truly fascinating here is how these stories aren't just, made up out of thin air. Dr. Saltz proposes they're forged from what she calls the 3 facets of Eve: nature, nurture, and culture. Let's start with nature. It sounds straightforward, maybe, but from a very young age, girls often experience these very real anxieties, persons too, about their own genitals versus, say, male genitals. I mean, imagine a 4-year-old learning about intercourse, right? And the fear that might kick in, thinking, how could a tiny little vagina ever hold such a thing?
Mm-hmm.
Or this idea that bigger is better, even for a little girl, can make her own indefinable space, as Dr. Saltz puts it, feel like a nothing. These early anxieties can really set a tone.
That's such an early foundational seed of self-perception, isn't it? Wow. And then if we move to nurture, what role do our parents play, often without even realizing it, right?
Oh, a huge role. Parental attitudes have this powerful, often completely unspoken impact. Think about parents who refer to genitals using euphemisms like down there, or,
So, like,
you know what I mean?
Right,
That
yeah.
this can subtly lead a child to perceive these really essential parts of themselves as somehow nameless. Or even, as Dr. Saltz describes it, like one big, mushy, stinky place, which
Yeah.
is just awful. And it's not just the explicit words, either parental disgust, maybe with a dirty diaper, or a mother's own discomfort with her sexuality that can be unconsciously conveyed, passed down. We also see these dynamics where, say, fathers might praise their son's point-and-shoot ability, and that can inadvertently leave daughters feeling embarrassed or just sort of ordinary,
Yeah.
because there's no parallel praise for their own bodies. It creates this silent hierarchy of value almost.
It's incredible how those subtle cues, those silences even, become so deeply ingrained. It really is. And then we have culture, which feels like this constant pervasive force. How does society contribute to these stories?
Yeah. Society constantly bombards us, often with really damaging ideas about sex, youth, perfect bodies. Women in particular often internalize this idea that their value rests primarily, maybe even solely, in their physical appearance. And that leads to genuine disgust or sadness when they inevitably age, as we all do.
Yeah.
But here's a surprising point from the source, actually. Dr. Saltz found that men are often more comfortable talking about vaginas than women are. And they truly appreciate them, the taste, the smell, the sensations. It really challenges that common misconception that, women are alone in their discomfort or embarrassment.
What really struck me as I was going through this material was Dr. Saltz's insight into how modern societal shifts, like women in high-power jobs, maybe even out-earning their husbands, how that can subtly create these unconscious struggles. It's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? How something we see as progress can have these underlying complicated effects.
It absolutely is. And it speaks to the the insidious nature of these stories, how deep they run. What's crucial to understand is that these unconscious narratives aren't static blueprints. They're not set in stone. They are active presences, constantly surrounding us, subtly filtering and influencing how we interpret the world right now. Even in seemingly unrelated daily situations, they are the lens through which you view everything, often without you even realizing it. They're like background music that shapes the entire mood of your life.
That makes so much sense. It really clicks. So with that foundation, let's explore some specific story types that Dr. Saltz identifies. The first one she unpacks is when you think you don't know what you're doing.
Hmm.
This really speaks to those nagging feelings of insecurity, of inadequacy. It's that internal whisper, that something is intrinsically wrong with you, that your parts might not work right, or that you just don't know the right way to have sex.
Yeah, and Dr. Saltz illustrates this with a composite case named Jenny. Jenny felt fundamentally broken. That was her word. She faked orgasms, she couldn't relax in bed, and those feelings of inadequacy didn't just stop there. They rippled out into her professional life, making her feel she didn't know what she was doing sexually or even in faculty meetings. It was pervasive. The sources of this story often stem from a profound lack of information in childhood. That's a big one. For instance, parents failing to name specific female sexual anatomy, right? Using those euphemisms instead. That can lead to what Dr. Saltz calls a misplaced loyalty to parents, like a subconscious adherence to their unspoken discomfort or silence around sexuality. And it makes adult women surprisingly resistant to truly learning about and understanding their own anatomy. Or maybe girls get misinformation, or they just can't process it in adolescence, and they internalize beliefs that sexual pleasure, including orgasm, is maybe a myth for women, or that their own parts are somehow inferior. Jenny's father, for example, made comments about baby fat and called other women knockouts, and that really reinforced a negative body image for her from early on.
Wow, that deep sense of inadequacy sounds just crippling, really difficult. What are the common symptoms of this particular story? And more importantly, how does Dr. Saltz suggest we start to, dismantle it?
Well, the symptoms often include these pervasive feelings of failure and inadequacy that, as I said, ripple into daily life, into all relationships. It often manifests as difficulty talking to oneself or talking to a lover about sexual desires, and often chronic failure to have orgasms, what's clinically known as anorgasmia. This can lead to feelings of isolation, loneliness, even doubts about whether orgasms are even real for women. Like, this is just something people talk about. The solution strategy is incredibly practical, which is great. It emphasizes self-education about anatomy. Dr. Saltz explicitly recommends turning to Appendix A. In her book, there's a diagram of female genitals, and she notes the common reluctance women feel about doing that. That hesitation is part of the story. So concrete action is essential. Things like masturbation, maybe using a vibrator. She even references the magic wand as an example. Just exploring what feels good. And importantly, performing Kegel exercises. These involve contracting your vaginal muscles, the PC muscles. And they're not only beneficial for pleasure, but also for things like bladder control. And they're surprisingly common. People do them anywhere.
Right. So you're saying someone might be doing Kegels right next to me on the subway, and I wouldn't even know it. That's quite a thought. But it also really emphasizes how accessible some of these solutions can be. They're not out of reach. Okay, let's turn our attention to another powerful narrative, one driven by a very different yet equally destructive emotion. This is when you think you don't deserve what you have. This one introduces guilt as this deeply rooted self-punishing story, and it leads to an unsatisfying sex life and then radiates outward into every corner of your world. Sharon's story is a powerful example here.
Yeah, Sharon's composite case reveals a woman with an active but profoundly unsatisfying sex life. It was characterized by a series of doomed relationships. She even abandoned a Mr. Right named Gene, just walked away. Unconsciously, Dr. Saltz argues, she used sex as a way to punish herself, always feeling like she is guilty until proven innocent, carrying this burden. The symptoms often include believing you've done something wrong, fundamentally wrong, which then often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, making you think, well, I'm a bad person, so I might as well act like one. And this leads to self-destructive choices, not just in sex, like having sex with Mr. Wrong, or maybe many partners without connection, but in other areas too, sabotaging friendships, family ties, work opportunities. Fantasies can be a huge source of concern here too. Take rape fantasies, for example. They're surprisingly common, Dr. Saltz notes, but she interprets them not as a literal wish for violation that's important, but perhaps a wish for power or control, or maybe even an abdication of responsibility. We also see this pattern of arousal, yes, orgasm, no, where women might mentally check out during sex. Making mental shopping lists, things like that. Sometimes women might even prefer to experience pain to prevent orgasm, or simply skip sex altogether. Avoid it.
It sounds like such a deeply entrenched cycle of self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Really painful. So what are the origins of this guilt typically? And how does Dr. Salt suggest breaking free from such a powerful narrative?
The sources often trace back to, say, a strict upbringing, where sex is seen as only acceptable within marriage, for example. This can lead to illicit feelings being linked somehow to excitement, but also heightened guilt. It gets tangled. Sharon's judgmental view of her own sister's trauma also played a part, feeding her sense of being bad. Her trigger point, the moment things really came to a head, was her college relationship with Jean. It seemed to encapsulate everything that could be right and wrong in her sex life, and it ultimately forced her to confront this pattern of self-sabotage she was stuck in. For solution, Dr. Soltz urges acknowledging bad thoughts as normal, as human. Everybody thinks bad thoughts, she says. What you think doesn't make you bad, it makes you human. That's a key quote. It's also vital to understand fantasies as thoughts, not actions, and to explore their underlying wishes or meanings. Forgiveness for past bad deeds is also key. Letting go. But first, and this is crucial, a reality check is needed for clinical depression, because depression can significantly distort your perceptions of your own actions and worth. So it's about self-compassion, yes, but also clinical awareness, making sure underlying mental health issues are addressed.
That's such an important distinction. Separating thoughts from actions, understanding the root of those thoughts, and checking for depression. Very practical. Okay, now we confront the green-eyed monster with story type 3. When you think you want what you don't have, this is where envy enters the bedroom, right? And then ripples outward into all areas of life, leading to this pervasive dissatisfaction. Peggy's story is a clear example.
Right, Peggy was this super mom, took immense pride in holding her family together. Seemed like she had it all figured out. But she became increasingly jealous of her husband Bob's power and influence in his demanding marketing job. And this jealousy led her to diminish him, to pick at him, and unconsciously to sabotage their sex life. Even though on the surface she had what looked like a perfect life, her story, Dr. Saul suggests, was rooted in childhood experiences of perceived exclusion, like watching her father and brother go on father-son outings and feeling like she wouldn't count in the same way, left out. Her mother's old-fashioned marriage, where she always deferred to her husband, that also played a role, set a pattern. Now, this isn't classic penis envy in the Freudian sense, Dr. Soltz clarifies. It's more a desire for the power, the freedom, the sense of belonging in the world that she felt her husband possessed, and she didn't.
Right, so it's not a literal envy of physical attributes, but rather what those attributes represent in terms of societal power or opportunity. Is that it? And how does this manifest in her relationships, particularly, in the bedroom?
Precisely. It's about the perceived power and freedom associated with, well, maleness in her view. The symptoms of this story include dwelling on sexual differences, feeling her own body as somehow flimsy compared to her husband's solid one. In bed, she found she didn't really want to give pleasure to Bob, maybe even wanted him to fail, or at least not succeed so easily. There was a competitiveness. She became continually critical of him outside the bedroom too, picking pointless arguments. It's this kind of whose dick is bigger attitude, as Dr. Salt puts it, seeing others, especially him, as rivals. And the warm glow of superiority, feeling like she'd won some internal competition that actually became the pleasure associated with sex for her, which is, quite distorted. Peggy's trigger point, her wake-up call, was when her younger son actually told her she needed a timeout after she criticized Bob again. And that innocent comment allowed her to suddenly see herself through her son's eyes and through Bob's eyes. And she didn't like what she saw.
Wow, that's a powerful moment of self-realization. From a child, no less. So if envy is the wedge driving them apart, what's the strategy for removing it, for rebuilding that connection?
The solution strategy really emphasizes that dialogue with her partner is absolutely crucial. Talk is what it takes to begin the process of healing, Dr. Saltz writes. This involves admitting the envy, maybe tactfully stating that she feels he got the better deal in some ways, and acknowledging that these feelings have acted as a wedge between them. The partner's role here is really important too, understanding how difficult this admission is, encouraging her, supporting her change, not getting defensive. For the listener, the core idea is learning to like what you have, appreciating your own life. Dr. Saul suggests making 3 lists: real competitions, the healthy, positive ones in life. Then, imagined competitions, the destructive ones, recognizing the competition is actually inside your head. Your partner's skill at cooking doesn't diminish you. And third, areas of life where your partner can help you, seeking support. Finally, she suggests developing a signal with the partner, like a subtle tug of the ear, to indicate, even in bed, when that little green monster of envy is surfacing. It can help them share a laugh, break the tension, and unite against the feeling, rather than letting it divide them. It's about disarming that internal rival.
That's a brilliant practical tip. I like that signal idea. Okay, next we dive into when you think you're emotionally vulnerable. This focuses on the powerful story of holding back, that fear of exposure and how this profoundly impacts intimacy. Stephanie's story brings this to life.
Yes, Stephanie's composite case shows a woman who held herself back in pretty much all areas of her life, including work, where she was terrified of presentations, just couldn't put herself out there, and in relationships, where she would literally stop sex before it even got going, continually withholding, pulling back. Her guardedness was primarily rooted in parental disapproval, particularly chronic, harsh criticism from her tyrannical father. This leads children, understandably, to isolate themselves emotionally. To protect themselves from further criticism, they end up constantly monitoring their own thoughts. Is this okay to think, to say? Culturally, this guardedness can manifest in two quite extreme forms. One is overcompensation, leading to raging success, like Stephanie's career woman persona. She's formidable, doesn't let anyone get close. Unconsciously responding to those past criticisms by vowing, "I'll show him," proving her worth through achievement, or the other extreme, underachievement, where someone suffers performance anxiety, gives awkward presentations, responds defensively to feedback, and unconsciously uses society's traditional view of women in the workplace to almost justify it, thinking something like, a man who underachieves is a loser. A woman who underachieves is, well, just a woman.
It's fascinating how one root cause, that criticism, can lead to such polar opposite behavioral patterns. Really striking. So whether it's overcompensation or underachievement, how does this guardedness impact a woman's sexual satisfaction and overall well-being?
Well, the symptoms she experienced included this constant anxiety and a vague sense of something's missing, like life isn't fully connecting. She had difficulty with mutual guidance and patience and intimacy in bed, often leading to issuing directives, like orders, rather than engaging in genuine connection and vulnerability. Society then serves as this constant reminder of what's sexually possible but unattainable for her, which builds confusion and makes a guarded woman question the point of even having a sex life at all. Why bother if I can't connect? The final pressure for Stephanie, the breaking point, came when she recognized she was withholding information from her therapist about her sexual relationship, and she realized, oh, this is a pattern. I do this everywhere. Therapy demands openness in a way even love sometimes doesn't, So it became this critical moment. And the big strategy for a woman feeling emotionally vulnerable, according to Dr. Saltz, really is therapy. She stresses the importance of being willing to listen, to consider options, even if it involves the discomfort of, spilling your guts, confronting those painful truths. It's about carefully peeling back those layers of protection that have been built up over years.
That makes perfect sense. Therapy can absolutely be that safe space to finally confront those deeply buried fears and patterns. Okay, our final story type brings us to the raw, physical aspect of fear and sexuality. This is when you think you're physically vulnerable. This can make intimacy seem less like connection and more like torture, potentially. Let's look at Courtney's story.
Right. Courtney's composite case illustrates a woman who is timid and cautious in pretty much all aspects of life, very risk-averse, and she felt profoundly weird about her body below the belt, disconnected. This manifested as a deep fear of physical intimacy and, in extreme cases, actual excruciating pain during sex. Vaginismus, perhaps. Her story had a very vivid childhood incident as a major source. She walked in on her father urinating, saw his penis as enormous, powerful, a purplish horn. Those were her words. And she slammed the door, terrified. This created a lasting, fearful image that really accompanied her into adulthood, into her sexual experiences. Parental dynamics also reinforced these male-female stereotypes for her. Her mother suffered from agoraphobia, keeping her mostly at home, while her father ventured out, brought home the bacon, so to speak. This created this primal man-strong, woman-weak dynamic in her mind. And culture, of course, reinforces this men are big and strong, women are small and weak prejudice all the time.
So it's this deep-seated fear that combines both a specific, maybe traumatic incident with these broader societal messages about strength and vulnerability. How does this translate into physical symptoms and that reluctance towards intimacy?
Well, it can create a literal inability to have sex without pain, or just the very idea of intercourse becomes incredibly intimidating, overwhelming. She might believe the physical logistics of sex just don't make sense because of the perceived size disparity. Penis big, vagina small. Yeah. Even though anatomically, that difference can actually be a source of pleasure and connection. She felt her fears were justified, almost rational. Seeing shadows of her father everywhere, maybe avoiding social gatherings where men might be perceived as threatening. Eventually, her fears started to affect her job performance and her social life, too. It really spread. The solution strategy here involves acknowledging biological differences. Okay, men are generally stronger physically, but it directly challenges that narrative of, in the battle between big and small, you can't win.
Mm.
Dr. Saltz suggests starting with self-education. She actually recommends educational films that document sexual activities, specifically showing vaginas accommodating different shapes and sizes of penises. And she's very clear. This is not pornography. It's anatomical education. Seeing is believing, sometimes. But she emphasizes that seeing may be believing, but only by doing will you be experiencing what your body needs to experience if it's to win the war of wills with your mind. So the listener is encouraged to physically explore their own body, to understand its inherent strength, its capabilities, its resilience, to reconnect.
That's a really powerful call to action, reclaiming your body, not just intellectually, but through direct physical experience. So we've kind of come full circle here. And what's absolutely clear is how these complex, often unconscious stories are so unique to each person. They arise from deep within, from nature, nurture, culture, and they have, over time, rippled outwards to define their entire lives. It's quite something. But the truly powerful, hopeful message from Dr. Saltz is that they can be changed. You're not stuck.
Exactly. That's the core message. Dr. Saltz reiterates how central women's brains are to the level and quality of their sexual experiences, famously calling it the sex organ between your ears. It starts there. Awareness is the crucial first step. Just recognizing these stories exist. Once you're aware, then comes acceptance. This is key. This is who you are, she says. Your stories, so far, have defined the way you think about sex, that have made you who you are, acknowledging it without judgment. But then, the most vital part, action. Just because this is who you are doesn't mean that this is who you have to stay. You can take that story and change it. That's incredibly empowering. This includes understanding how even seemingly physical changes, like pregnancy or menopause, are deeply influenced by how we think about sex. Our mindset matters hugely. She cites examples of women in their 70s who radiate confidence and powerful femininity and have satisfying sex lives. It's not about age. Or women who experience the end of menstruation as a kind of liberation rather than a loss. It's about the framing.
So it's really about reframing our own internal narrative around these natural life stages, isn't it? Rather than letting external, often negative narratives define us. How does one even begin this journey of positive change, though? Especially if these stories feel so deeply ingrained, so automatic.
Well, reclaiming your sexuality, she stresses, is a positive choice. It's not a defensive one, not something you have to do, but something you choose for yourself. And how do you start? Her advice is simple. Start somewhere, and start right now, as in today. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It can be something small, she suggests. Doesn't have to be huge, like maybe trying sex in the morning. Testosterone levels are often higher then for both men and women, can lead to more excitement, fresh perspective. Or maybe planning sex, if you never do. Anticipation can actually enhance it for some people. Or, conversely, trying spontaneity if you usually plan everything. Just shake things up. The point is simply to do something, anything, to initiate change, to break the pattern. And finally, therapy is highlighted again as a terrific tool to help guide you through the difficult areas, to help reframe questions and perspectives, helping people confront the hard and unvarnished truth about ourselves, as she puts it, and see themselves more lucidly, more clearly. It's really about taking that first, often uncomfortable, but necessary step.
Right. So the core takeaway from this deep dive is really profound, isn't it? Your sexual identity isn't merely physical. It's profoundly shaped by these stories you tell yourself, often without even realizing it. And recognizing, then consciously changing these narratives that can indeed lead to a powerful, transformative ripple effect, one that elevates and maybe even redefines your entire life. It's truly a journey from the inside, from the bedroom outward.
Absolutely. And maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener. Consider today. What small, concrete action can you take, maybe even today? Something to surprise yourself, perhaps, or your partner. Something to break an old habit, however small. Or just to challenge one assumption you hold about your sexual self. Because that tiny shift, as Dr. Saltz suggests, that single step, it can be the unexpected beginning of a powerful journey. A journey to reclaim the sexuality that is rightfully yours. And ultimately, perhaps, reveal who you really are.